Welcome to This Week in Warframe, a series where I keep you updated on the past week of Warframe, from announcements made by DE that don't necessarily warrant their own videos to community fan art, post, and updates. So without further ado, let's go over D's announcements and news from the 28th of January to the 3rd of February. Starting this episode off, we have a giant list of reworks and changes coming to a number of frames within the game. First up, there's Ash. So what they've done here is made it so players can roam while Bladestorm is active. Basically, your clones will eliminate the selected targets, and you'll be able to roam around killing any other targets that are on the map. But if you do want to join in on the cutscene action, you can do so by teleporting, which apparently will be a free energy cost if you're going into Bladestorm. The second frame up for change is Ember, specifically her World on Fire. So if the proposed change goes through, World on Fire's damage and energy cost will increase by double the initial value, while simultaneously lowering the range by half. Those changes will only activate 5 seconds after the initial cast, and will scale for 10 seconds before reaching the maximum and minimal values shown. Scott also stated on Twitter that he'll be taking a look at Ember's first, second, and third abilities, as well as her passive once he returns to the office this week. Gara will also be receiving a change to her mass Vitrify, where this change will allow the glass barrier to scale based off of the health and shields of the enemies caught within the initial casting radius. So the more enemies you have within the barrier, the stronger the wall will be. Moving on, we have a nerf and kick in the nuts for Chroma players, with a quote-unquote fix coming to his Vex armor calculations, which, to note, has been known by the developers for a long period of time, yet is only receiving a fix just now due to the planes of fucking Eidolon. So I 100% agree with Tactical Potato's comments in the last 4 minutes of his coverage of these changes, with a link to that video in the description. Also, Forma should definitely be refunded for players affected by most of these changes, especially for Chroma, since it's been a long time that they've known of this fix and they're only just changing it now. But it's not all bad news, as Chroma can now freely move using Spectral Stream, and as a bonus that ability's damage output can be increased by Vex armor, so there is that. Also, there's no news in regards to Vex Armor and Elemental Ward merging together as one ability at this time, but Scott did reply to a tweet regarding Vex Armor and Elemental Ward becoming recast abilities, stating that he might take a look. So you never know, we may see more changes to Chroma before they actually go live, since as usual they are all subject to change before and after release. After Chroma, we have Atlas's rework and changes. First things first, he has a new mechanic that's tied to his second ability Petrify, and that is titled Rubble. This mechanic will allow Atlas to regain health or armor depending on his current health values by killing petrified enemies. Pablo also stated on the dev workshop that they'll be adding a HUD icon to indicate to players how much rubble a player has collected. Now, each individual rubble that you collect will be on a timer, so you won't have it for a long duration. Now, as for his first ability, Landslide, it will now deal extra damage and generate rubble upon killing petrified units, which is a bonus since you'll now be able to use Landslide while Petrify is active, and that's on top of receiving an increase to his hit radius with that proposed distance now being 2 meters. As for that second ability Petrify, as previously stated, players will now be able to use other abilities while it's active, as well as use it to both heal your rumblers and increase the damage output and velocity of your tectonics, by simply aiming in their general direction. Obviously for tectonics, you'll want to do this while the barrier is still erect and before you've converted it into a boulder. As for the final change to Atlas, that goes to his Rumblers, which will make it so upon casting Rumblers, units caught within the casting area will instantly become petrified. The dev workshop also stated that when your Rumblers expire, they'll create rubble based off of their remaining health. So if they aren't dead by the time they expire, you get a bit of rubble. Moving on once again, there are changes coming for Banshee's Augment Resonating Quake. Now these changes will make it so the player can walk around while the Quake is active, and will also have double the range of a normal cast, with the damage increasing closer to the source of the Quake, but instead of being a channeled ability that drains the user's energy like the current state of the Augment, it will now be duration based, and that duration will be rather low. We're still going now, and the next frame is going to be Mag. Now she'll be receiving an increase to her base energy pool. Her normal variant will have a base pool of 125 energy, and her prime will have 175 energy. Obviously that may change before the changes go live, but we'll just have to wait and see. Now, energy won't be the only changes coming to Mag, as both her Polarize and Crush will be receiving some changes as well. So Polarize will have shards that will now scale based on the caster's power strength and a percentage of the damage dealt to the affected unit's health. And as for Crush, it will now provide shields to nearby players when damage has been inflicted upon enemies, and the shield amount will be based off the amount of enemies affected by Crush. Scott also replied to someone on Twitter regarding Crush, and it may receive another cast speed increase. As for Vault fans, you can now rejoice as you'll soon receive a much requested change, and that is of course the removal of Discharge's damage cap. Now on top of its removal, they also increase the ability's base damage output to 1200 from the previous 750, however to combat their concerns of a full map stun lock, they have also reduced the damage and stun duration by half, only to enemies that are a certain distance away from Vault. But the workshop does state that the distance, stun, and damage will be affected by mods, which will probably mean someone will work out how to bypass their efforts once the changes go live. On to our last frame to receive some changes and a rework, and that is of course Zephyr. Now her first ability Tailwind has been combined with Dive Bomb, which upon casting from the ground will propel Zephyr upwards and then allow her to hover for a short duration. Now while in the air, the player will be able to use the ability again. Aiming downward will activate Dive Bomb, while aiming in other directions will send her in that direction. Now since Dive Bomb was merged, it has since been replaced with Air Burst, which will send a projectile wherever you were looking. And upon impact with that projectile, any unit within the blast radius will go into a ragdoll. The ability will also increase the size of tornadoes if it has been launched into them, because everyone loves tornadoes and ragdolling with her current setup. Now moving on, Turbulence hasn't been touched in any way, but her fourth ability has been. So tornadoes will spawn where your cursor was located upon casting, kind of like Hydroid's tentacles at the moment. However, the closest tornado to you will follow your cursor, so you have a control over your tornadoes, which I still don't understand why. Also, just like the current build, tornadoes will absorb and mimic the largest amount of elemental damage dealt to them, and will deal that damage to enemies that are caught within the tornadoes. Now they also stated that the tornado will do a better job at stabilizing and holding caught enemies, which means less ragdoll, but, you know, it's still a fucking tornado. Now we have some timeline for when these changes will go live, as Rebecca did comment on Primetime or one of the live streams this week, and that would be this week coming or the week after, and if we don't get it then, it just may end up being delayed. Now we probably won't get all of these Warframe changes, we may get some of them and then some later, but that's all we know at the moment. So if you don't like any of the proposed changes, make sure you provide feedback with your suggestion in a friendly manner on the forums, Twitter, or the Warframe subreddit. Moving on from the reworks and changes, there is an update in regards to the Prime Vault. Now this update comes in the form of the exact items coming in the Prime Vault on the 6th of January. Now the items come in 4 packs, with no separate accessories pack for those wondering, since DE does need to make money, and that's the best way to do it. So the Prime frames returning include Loki, Ember, and Frost. Their weapons include the Glaive Prime, Latron Prime, Reaper Prime, Sicarus Prime, and the Bow Prime. As for the packs, Loki's individual pack will of course come with the frame and weapons, 400 Platinum, Worm Prime, Summer's Prime Sentinel accessories, Demand Prime Sugatra, and the Loki Prime glyphs. Frost will come with the frame and weapons, 400 Platinum, Misa Prime Syandana, the Titan Extractor Prime, and the glyphs. Embers will come with a frame, weapons, 400 Platinum, the Pyra Prime Syandana, a Titan Extractor Prime, and the Ember Prime glyphs. Or you could just purchase the Ember and Loki bundle, which will come with each of their pack items and weapons and everything, with some extra plat. Now the prices aren't live, but if we were to go off the previous vaultings, the individual packs would cost about $40, and the dual pack will cost about $60. Now for those of you who are new, you can farm each of these items in-game while the Prime Vault is open, so up until April 6th, as that is when it closes, with the exception of the cosmetics and the Prime Extractors. The drop locations for these relics are unknown at the time of recording, but Rebecca or Megan did mention that the Vault exclusive relics may only drop from the bounties this time round, so the bounties on the Plains of Eidolon, which in my opinion is fucking stupid, and I won't be grinding for that crap if it does turn out to be the case. But if you do want to do that and it turns out to be the case, that's a good way to make some platinum in the future. Now the next topic is updates. First off, there's hotfix 22.10.3, which decreased the time between bounties so you no longer have to wait around. They also fixed a number of issues and made a few more changes. There was also update 22.11 on PC, which launched the second part of the 3-part Tennogen Round 11 wave, with Harrow Grax, Octavia Diva, Oberon Wendigo, Excalibur Corpora, Trinity Knightess, Saren Velenosa, and a few more skins in there as well. Some mining buffs were in there, and a lot of changes and fixes. The update link is in the description, as well as my solo video covering all of the patch notes, so if you want to watch or read them, the links are at your disposal. Now for console players, another update has been sent in for certification, and that is update 22.10.1. In this update, you'll be receiving everything up to the point of Misa's deluxe skin, and even Tennogen Round 11 Part 1, which all of the information for that update will be found in the forum post link in the description. Now after the updates, we have some news regarding Arcane helmets and Trial Arcanes. Now most of us know Arcane helmets won't be returning or changing anytime soon, but as for Trial Arcanes, it does seem that they are aware of players' concerns and requests for Arcane slots that are separate to cosmetics. But there's too much going on at the moment in regards to development, because we got the Sacrifice quest, got the next open world for some fucking reason, and probably a bunch of other stuff, so there's just too much at the moment, but we may see it come into the game further in Warframe's ongoing development. Next up, Steve tweeted out a preview of the new upcoming text rendering that will provide clear and sharp text in-game, because at the moment, I don't know if you've seen it, but my game's definitely had it, where the text is rather blurry, and according to his tweet, that's a bug. As for our second last topic of this week's episode, it's a Twitter thread and conversation about the resonating Quake Augment changes, fun in Warframe, and affinity and focus game. It's worth a read, and if you want to reply to it, it's up to you. Lastly, DE released another Remote Observer with Volume 21, which is an extremely brief coverage of what's been mentioned so far, as well as in previous episodes of this series. The link to that will be in the description for anyone who needs it. Now that is all the relevant Digital Extremes information that I could gather for this week. So as usual, we'll finish the video up with a few highlights from the community. First up, we have Are You Ready to Hunt by Hoti-To on Deviant Art. Sorry if I got your name wrong. After that, there's a custom Grineer character with a bit of backstory by Dindle. There's also 2 more pieces by the same artist with Baby Heck 1 and Baby Heck 2. Second last, there's 012718 by Heimloss, and the last community piece goes to Imakan's Space MILF. Now as usual, all of the links to everything that I mentioned are in the description, as well as links to all of the creators' artworks that I showcased here today. If you found this video informative, make sure to leave a like. If you think I can improve upon something or wish to share your opinion on one of the topics that I mentioned, you can of course do so with a comment down below. If you missed out on last week's episode, you can check it out by clicking the annotation on the screen right now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.